بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. Assalamu alaikum brothers. How are you guys doing today? Alhamdulillah. So inshallah we're going to be discussing some very interesting things with regards to Islam and neo-atheism and what the duty and the responsibility of the Muslims is to actually, how we should actually go about tackling this issue of neo-atheism. So I advise all of you guys to inshallah, lend us an attentive ear, inshallah, listen all the way through. We have something very exclusive and important to share with you right at the end. But if you're trying to be cheeky and jump to the end to get it and miss the middle, you're not going to understand it because you have to follow it all the way throughout, inshallah. So you have to bear with us and be patient, inshallah. We'll leave you with something beneficial if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. Inshallah. So akhi, neo-atheism. For those that are not yet familiar with what the term is, right? Because we know what atheists are. What are neo-atheists?
Well, see, we have the normal atheists, right?
Uh-huh.
Who are nice people.
Uh-huh.
And the majority of us have them as friends in university, in our workplaces, right? But then there's this specific branch of the neo-atheists, right? They have heads. They have almost like gods who are like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett. And what these neo-atheists do, they're like really this aggressive, they have this aggressive nature, right? And they go around making videos about Islam, completely misrepresenting everything.
Yeah.
They go and study about Islam. Surprisingly and funny enough that they go to anti-Islamic sources and study Islam.
Okay.
Right? Even though they're at university and they've got a good educational background, right? And they go and then they study Islam in incorrect manner and they come back and they start criticizing it. And the Muslims are like, hold on, and the Muslims who actually don't know much about Islam, or haven't actually learned a lot about their deen themselves, they get confused by these things. And they start asking questions, they go to this scholar, oh, this mentions this in the Quran. And even people have even come to me and they've said, okay, I've come across this video, what about this? And it's really silly.
Yeah.
Because first of all, half of the things they say is not even true.
Yeah.
Second of all, they've completely misunderstood it. Like many Islamic verses. So you'll see people who come, they'll like even have learned Arabic on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they'll give you a verse and they'll laugh and they'll put pictures and they'll like try and explain it to you. When it's actually so funny because they don't actually understand the verse in the first place. And so these neo-atheists are really these rude, arrogant people, mostly on YouTube, and you come across them as well in certain places, who just hate religion, and they hate Islam as well. And recently, I don't know, you sent me that article, right?
Yeah.
Where there's this whole hoo-ha with Richard Dawkins going around and criticizing Islam. And he hasn't even read the Quran.
No, it's not even just Richard Dawkins. Like you clearly pointed out, we have to make the distinction that between neo-atheists and atheists as in general, because atheists are, general atheists are normal people who are in some cases looking for the truth, right? So we're not putting them in the same boat. We have to make this clear distinction first.
Of course.
Now these neo-atheists, if you like, this extreme sort of end of atheism, like you said, they don't study Islam. They don't study Islam from any, valid sources, right? They study Islam through some strange sources which no one really considers to be strong in any respect.
Back about 8-9 decades ago.
8-9 decades ago, an Orientalist who weren't considered as
there is actually one guy, funny enough, on YouTube who actually he's got a new video. I don't want to mention any names, but he's got his video and then he like mentions his background. He said that he would actually go to anti-Islamic sources, but then he stopped and he went to the correct sources and he started reading the Quran, he started reading the Hadith. But the funny thing is, right, all this guy's stuff he gets from like old Orientalist books, which is really funny because when I've shown it to people of knowledge and even students of knowledge, they like laugh. They're like, I know this guy. The guy he's referring to. For example, he has one where he talks about word borrowing in the Quran, yeah? So he picks a few words and he says, look, it says it in this book. And the other atheists who don't have a clue about Islam, they get really impressed and they say stuff like, oh, if a Muslim's going to debate him, he better prepare because he knows stuff. When they're having discussions, when this guy talks, everyone else goes quiet. Because they don't have a clue what he's talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Right? Yeah. Okay, anyways. So he has this video and he talks about all these words and he goes and refers to a guy called Arthur Jeffrey, right?
Yeah.
And you look at Arthur Jeffrey, this guy was born in the 1800s, yeah? And then he died in like the early 1900s, right? And he has this book and he goes and finds and he's a Protestant. So he's like one of these Christians who doesn't like Islam at all, right? and he gets all these words.
Because
And
at that time, obviously, there was.
yeah, exactly. At that time, you couldn't access knowledge as we can today.
Yeah.
You know, go to internet, travel around,
Yeah.
and so he gets all these words and he studies them and he says, "Look, this is it. These words are borrowed."
Bro, you know, it simply boils down to this, right? This particular individual cannot even distinguish between a Muslim and a Muslim scholar, right? I mean, this is what it boils down to, and I think we have to highlight this. If a person can't even make such a simple distinction,
Yeah.
right? Then how could you expect this person to speak about something far more complex like Quranic sajah, for example?
No,
You
it's
know,
it's
or-
funny because I've seen these guys, right? They say some smart stuff,
Yeah.
and some of them are quite knowledgeable.
Yeah.
No, in other fields, not Islam,
Yeah.
clearly. And what happens is sometimes, look, they say smart stuff, and you can tell, all right, they know their stuff, okay, what they're talking about, like other things other than Islam. But when they start speaking about Islam, some of them say such stupid things, right? And you'll see it's funny because none of them correct each other.
Yeah.
They'll carry on making these blunders, and they won't correct each other just because it's anti-Islam.
And you know, one of the things that's actually becoming a bit lame now, right? Is this kind of technique sort of that they have in their argumentation is to mock and ridicule.
I don't
right?
know the text, basically.
Yeah, it's just to sit there and make fun, and subhanAllah, it's actually quite geeky. They're just sitting there, they're making these really silly little jokes, they're trying to mock, you know, Islam or whatever, and they think that they've actually presented an undercutting defeater to our arguments. They think they've actually smacked us in the face because they shared a few giggles, right? But I think generally, right, they've got this kind of urge to do this since you have the likes of Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Lawrence Krauss come out with the kind of things that they come out with. Because this kind of attitude, we didn't really see it pre-God delusion, right? It's kind of after that it happened.
It's a new prophet, right?
The new prophet, right?
But just to finish off what I was saying about
Uh-huh.
the guy, so he gets all these words and he says they're like not in the Quran, they've borrowed from different languages, and then the argument is so silly, right? Because philosophy,
Yeah.
right? Where's the is it English word? No, it's a Greek word.
The Greek word.
But will anyone tell you, you know what? Sorry, mate, I don't understand that word because it's not an English word. No, they wouldn't. These words, it's a natural phenomenon actually in language. It's called linguistic borrowing.
Yeah.
What happens is these words come in, say from travelers or other people, and after a while they become part of the language.
Of course.
And this is what Imam Shafi says.
Yeah.
He says this was part of the language.
Yeah.
If you said these words to an Arab, they would know what you were
Yeah.
saying. They weren't like a word where people like, oh, this word is in the Quran, we don't understand it.
Yeah.
Because you see poets like Walid bin Mughira, who was the best poet in Arabia at that time.
Yeah.
Did he have a problem with foreign words? Or did he even mention them?
No.
Why did the Arabs at that time, who knew all this because it was their time, why don't they mention all this? Why do we have to have a Protestant coming like so many years later, right, criticizing it and finding these books? And then we have these little kids on YouTube, right, who go and take these things and they reference it, and the other atheists think, oh man, this is amazing, he's referenced it, he's got his resources, he knows. I clearly don't know what he's talking about, but I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
And this is silly, and it just brings us back to these heads, right?
You know what,
Hitchens,
exactly. Let's not waste time on
Krauss.
these guys that are just wasting
Yeah.
their time and other people's times, talking literally rubbish in lack of any other better words to use for this, and it is a waste of time. So let's move on. Let's address the main issues that we're going to be addressing in this video, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So
Why don't you start off
inshallah,
with Dawkins?
Well, see, I think one of the biggest problems is this sheep following mentality. Okay, someone, as you said, comes up, says something. I clearly don't know what he's talking about, but because he's wrapped it in a few, nice words, got some good rhetoric, and the semantics are kind of well structured, let me just follow him. And that's exactly the case with Richard Dawkins, because if you read this individual's book, right, you'd be surprised that how can someone of his academic caliber write such childish stuff. I mean, for example, his fundamental argument, right, in chapter 4, he concludes, he summarized the argument in 6 points, right? Basically, you can't have God as the first cause because God is too complex, right? And if you say God is the next cause, then you have to ask who caused that cause. And the way he phrases it, that if you say that God is a designer, then you have to ask who designed the designer, because God is obviously complex, so his design would have to be more complex, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't want to go too deep into trying to, in the various ways when we can defeat this argument, but just to show you the on what kind of shaky ground he's on. I mean, for him to actually say that, he's actually destroying science, because he's saying that the best explanation that we can put forth is God as the intelligent designer of the universe, right? And he acknowledges that there seems to be intelligent design, and therefore the best explanation that we put forth is God. But he says only because we need to know who designed that designer, it can't be. So what he's saying is that the best explanation requires an explanation. Now, this actually destroys science, because the whole point of science is to provide an explanation.
And English.
Pardon?
And English.
And English, okay, right. So that's like saying a scientist comes up with an explanation for some natural phenomena, but then you say, what explains the scientist? And what is the explanation of that explanation? Then what is the explanation of that explanation? What explains that explanation? Resulting in an infinite regress of explanations, resulting in no ultimate explanation, right? So, and then what's the point of science? Because the whole point of science is to provide an explanation. You see what I'm saying? So in this regard, it's just you
I guess he likes explanations. Just when it comes to God, he doesn't like the explanations.
The whole, like you said, the fundamental premise that in philosophy of science, the best explanation doesn't require an explanation.
Exactly.
Otherwise, you keep going on and you never have science.
But he says something else, right? Which is quite shocking. And for me to read this, I was like, wow, right? And it will become apparent to you why. He says, then we're talking about the first, the uncaused cause, or the first cause, right? He mentions that many a time he speaks to his theologian friends, and they say there has to be something rather than nothing. There has to be a first cause of everything. And he says, yes. He says, yes, there has to be a first cause. But why do you say it's God? Why? So he accepts that there has to be a first cause, right? And the only reason he says that it can't be God is because of the intelligent designer, but because that's a fallacious argument. If, according to what he's saying, if we can show him that that's wrong, which we have, right, because it's incoherent, it doesn't follow, then that means he's got nowhere to run other than to accept that there is intelligent design, which is apparent, right? And you have to attribute it to the first cause, to a cause, which is the first cause, and he acknowledges that there couldn't be an infinite regress, otherwise we wouldn't exist. So ultimately, Richard Dawkins has nowhere to run, and he needs to take a shahada.
Yeah. It's interesting because this video is speaking to Muslims, right? And I think it's interesting for people to see that, although a lot of them may not have come across these arguments, and like me, I haven't even read his book, Richard Dawkins' book, because I don't need to, right? But the interesting thing is that, these guys, they are the heads, right? And people follow them, but it's when you look at their arguments, they're just so silly. We look at Professor Krauss, right? Hamza debated Lawrence Krauss, and Lawrence Krauss is one of the top physicists in the world, and he's big debater. He goes around spreading atheism, talking about atheistic beliefs and stuff. And
the best friend Richard Dawkins, basically.
Yeah, best friends, right? Because they have the documentary coming out, and so they go together and they do talks about how there can be no God and stuff. But when you look at his points in Hamza's debate, they're so silly.
Yeah.
For Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation, right? He goes, how about zero gods? He goes, that's the simplest. The zero gods explain anything. No, it doesn't. But he's completely misunderstood it. Because Occam's razor has the explanation, it has the greatest explanatory scope. So the explanation can be a bit more complicated, but it has a greater explanatory scope, so that's the one you use. And this guy, he doesn't even understand it. He doesn't understand Occam's razor. Then he goes on to infinity, right? And there were some people in the audience who didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I respect their views, because they obviously thought that Hamza isn't a physicist. This guy is, so he must be right about this.
Stuff,
because I don't understand.
Yeah.
And I do the same if I know someone has studied this more. But check this out, right? But I knew he was wrong. So he talks about infinity, right? And Hamza goes, there's no infinity, alright? We don't know of infinity. And then he draws a circle and he goes here.
Yeah.
But people don't understand, this isn't maths. And there's other people who draw 2 lines and they're like, okay, I've cut it in half. I can cut it in half again. I can keep cutting it, right? And that's infinity. It exists in front of you. That's like saying the distance between me and Imran is infinity.
Yeah.
I can just walk across to him. Will it take me infinity years to get to him?
Of course not, you can reach him. But
Exactly.
But this is, what it is, bro? They're clutching at straws, right? And I wouldn't even call them intellectual straws, because they're not intellectual. It's just they're clutching at whatever they can to validate atheism, right? And we know they're on a sinking ship. You know, and the method. I mean, this is what's been criticized, and we pointed out the articles that recently been published. What's happening is that what they're doing is they're attacking Islam. You know, they in some ways, you know, one of the articles even stated that it's almost on the verge of being racist, right? But just to push this narrative
Sam
of
Harris,
atheism, Harris, and even Dawkins to some extent, but Sam Harris in particular, they just tried to push atheism down people's throats, you know, at the cost of anything. And they're being exposed, and you know, people are pointing them out, and these are non-Muslims who are pointing them out. So not even that Muslims are getting together and trying to attack these guys.
Sometimes agnostics as well.
Exactly, and these are honest people. They can see what's going on. They can see, you know, what these guys are doing, and it's just sad, really.
And these are quite reputable figures as well.
Of course,
right?
yeah.
It's not like it's any Tom, Dick, and Harry.
No, of course not. I mean, it's
But, do any of you guys see Rich Dawkins' tweets?
I've stopped
about the niqabs
But he's always angry for some reason.
Yeah.
He's always angry. He's always frustrated. He's always posting like articles of what's happening in the world, and he like never posts something good or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's like he is living a depressed life.
You know what?
That's
That
what
happens,
it is.
أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ وَتَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبُ, right? Only in the remembrance of Allah will hearts find peace.
And those who turn away from his remembrance will live a depressed life.
And you know what else they're doing? What's interesting is Sam Harris. I mean, atheists know, right? What is it that every single one of these guys, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, you know, Atkins, all of these, what do? They love passing moral judgments, and we've spoken about this before. They love to throw things at people, yeah? You know, religion's bad, you guys cover your women in bin bags, and, you know, you grow your beards, you know, you're evil people, all of these sort of moral judgments they pass, yeah? And Harris knows that atheists have no basis to pass such strong moral judgments, right? There's no grounding. What grounding do they have? You know, what validates the objective? They can't validate objective moral values and duties. And so what Harris has attempted to do in the past is write the moral landscape, right? And in it he tries to explain, you know, you could validate objective moral values through science, you know, and he goes to do this by redefining what good is. He basically says, first it's all about human flourishing somehow, or the flourishing of sentient beings.
This is very interesting. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
I mean, the landscape is basically the peaks and troughs. The peaks represent human flourishing.
So there's a landscape, right?
Yeah.
There's
It's
explain it
almost
for
like
people, right? So it's a graph like this, right?
Yeah, it could be any.
And at the top of it, right, is the happiest people.
Or the peaks, yeah.
Yeah.
Or which
At
is
the top is
humans
happiness.
are flourishing, they're happy,
Okay.
and
Okay.
Well,
And from this, he's trying to explain how we have morals.
yeah, and then he says that good is what leads to human flourishing. So he's redefining good,
Okay.
right? So obviously, if
So
you
that
Like-
means
like-
what happened in Nazi Germany.
Right.
If it was to lead to the human flourishing there.
you know what, Imran, that is the undercutting defeats of the argument. It destroys the argument. You know, a rapist, when does he flourish?
When you raise
He's
A rapist. A molester, when does a molester flourish? Do you see where you can go with this? Imagine how many people use the moral landscape to validate so many atrocities in the world.
So, okay, but they might come up with the argument that if it harms human life, or if it causes pain or distress or stops like human flourishing, it's wrong. So like Krauss comes up in his debate and he speaks about incest, right?
Yeah.
But you know what the funny thing is? So he's trying to rationalize it, and a lot of atheists, new atheists as well, don't actually have a problem with what he said, right? But my question is, why did he say once?
Yeah.
He said if you sleep with your brother or sister, right? Once.
Yeah.
Why does it have to be once?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
funny, right?
It's unnecessary. It was an unnecessary point that he made.
No, but he said once.
Yeah.
It's really silly. I
Yeah,
mean,
he
I
can-
really don't understand
I mean,
why.
yeah,
he was.
You know what? I mean, as he said, right, that there is an ingrained taboo inside all of us. That taboo is inside him, and ultimately he has to be inside all of these atheists that are coming and to defend him, right? It just seems that they're really going out on a limb for the guy, right? Because the implications of what he's basically saying, when he says you can go and sleep with your sister,
So you can go and sleep with his
you
grandma
can go
as well.
sleep with your grandma. You can go sleep with
What about your daughter?
your mum, your daughter, right? And this is
This is,
This
well, they're
is
promoting him. This is Richard Dawkins' best friend.
and PZ Myers tried to come to his rescue. He tried to come to Lawrence Krauss's rescue by writing an article. And for those of you that don't know, PZ Myers is a prestigious biologist, right?
Professor, yeah.
Is it- yeah,
Embryologist.
Embryologist, right? And he wrote an article saying that horses, right, are known to have incest. And he put like a family tree of a horse and how one horse would have slept with his grandma and all that stuff. So it's like, listen, don't be surprised. Incest is all around us. It's okay, right? and he used some derogatory language in there.
Yeah.
My question,
He's angry again.
yeah, my question to him is: since when did animals become role models for human beings, right? Because Lawrence Krauss used the same fallacious argument in the debate against Hamza, where he said, well, there is homosexuality in the animal kingdom, right? So,
but it's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous because, let's take it a step further then, because some animals, for example whales, will actually engage in rape.
Sharks.
Rape like
Some
orgies,
sharks,
right?
okay. So if you justify it through horses,
Yeah.
if you can pick and choose from the animal kingdom, right, and justify your actions, so now people can justify rape by using sharks, like Peter Myers justified horses. And this is an embryologist, and this is a new atheist.
But you know what? From the naturalistic position, from their worldview, they are just animals that have evolved, basically. So what else can you say to them? And this is one of the many problems.
Okay, so why are they wearing clothes? And it's not true when they say just because it's cold. Because what happens in the summertime? Does a man walk around naked?
No.
It's
not because of the law, because they don't do that in front of their kids at home.
Yeah.
They don't walk around naked.
What's interesting, bro? Justin Al-Barrett, he's written a book, Born Believers, and I think as far as I know, he's a professor and a psychologist as well, and he studied cognitive psychology, and he studied children, basically, and he's done an extensive study on them. And what he's shown basically in his book is that the belief in God or the belief in a divine being is natural, right? And he so shows that children naturally develop this belief. I mean, if you were to take children and put them on an island, they would more than likely develop this belief that God exists.
There's a fitra, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to go there. They attribute purpose to life, to things, right? They don't just think things come out of nothing. And these are children, right? And he also goes on in his book to show how atheism is unnatural, because most people believe in God. What I think one of the things that's happening is, like you said, you have these roots, which are Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Atkins, all of these guys who have become sort of celebrities, right? And then you've got these followers, who probably because of the lack of time are blind following, these guys, and not really questioning what's going on. I mean, even if we just look at it from the innate perspective, like Justin Al-Barrett does, just what's natural, right? And he shows that theism is natural and not atheism. And like the fitra, Imran, you probably want to highlight the hadith or the Prophet ﷺ, where he speaks about the fitra, and how it's natural, and it's the parents that take them.
That everyone is born upon the correct religion, but it was the devils that made them go astray. And the Quran obviously is more explicit, where Allah says that He already asks, "Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord?" But see, this brings us to another aspect of our discussion, right? Now, you're saying that obviously the fitra is there, something that they can't deny. Most of these people have not rationally been able to justify their kufr. They have not been able to rationally justify their disbelief. Their disbelief is resting on the belief of the disbelief of individuals like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris.
Who are crumbling now.
Exactly, right?
Too many words.
Now, but tell me, what is it that drives an individual, right, to such a degree where they've got this much animosity and adversity against religion and their creator that they're trying to find any excuse they can to not believe, and they're just resting upon what these giants say.
They're skeptic fundamentalists, right? If they see an apple tree, right, and they see an apple on the floor, they're not going to say that most likely the apple fell from the tree. They're going to say no, probably came from space. There's either alien bought it, or either someone came and put it here. They will not go for the best explanation. They will go for every explanation,
no matter how irrational
how irrational it is. Not concerning like how things work and plants, everything, but concerning this universe and the creation of it.
And I think it's like two other points as well. One, now I'm not speaking for anyone on anyone's behalf, or I'm not trying to point this out towards anyone. Somewhat to do with upbringing, childhood experiences that they had, religious experiences that they had, parents, and it could be some of this, and some of it could be the fact that some people just don't like to feel like they're being controlled, right? Or they have this issue where they don't want to be controlled. Again, this could stem from childhood issues and problems.
I think you may have got it right. In my opinion, Allah knows best. I think it comes down to running away from accountability. They want to escape the notion of accountability, and it reminds me of the Quraysh at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because their biggest issue one of their biggest issues, one of their key issues, right, was the fact that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may peace and blessings be upon him, was obviously communicating the message and the warning of the Day of Judgment, right? The final accountability. And this is one of the biggest issues they had, because had they accepted that, then they would have now had to actually think twice before they went and slept with whoever they slept with. They'd have to think twice before they killed their daughters. They'd have to think twice before they rip off someone or beat a slave. And they have to think twice before they do anything evil, because they knew they'd be held accountable for it, right? They denied the second creation. Now, I see a similar pattern with these new atheists, right? They're also running away from accountability, because if you don't have accountability, then you can go and sleep with whoever you want, you can fornicate with whoever you want, you can drink as much alcohol as you want, you can do as much damage
You
to
can
property.
justify as much as you want from
Justify
animals.
as much as you want from animals. You can go and have rape-like orgies, and you can kill your child as the animals do, right? And you can justify it because it's down. We all evolve.
Some animals kill their children, right?
Some animals kill their
So
children.
it's fine. That's another disaster with
Infanticide,
their
right?
argument.
Exactly.
So you can justify that.
Exactly, according to them. And the problem is there, as the Quraysh at the time, the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, denied the second creation, all they're doing is denying the first. Which is why when the Quran talks about the proof of the resurrection, these same arguments are valid, right? With regards to the first creation as well.
But are they really free? That's another question. People, for some reason, I find this very strange that some people find it liberating, or certain atheists, neo-atheists find it liberating that they don't believe in a God that's so controlling them, or that they're enslaved to.
I'll tell you what, yeah. There's some people, right, who have this thing that start thinking about death, and you'll see this a lot.
Yeah.
There's a trend in neo-atheists, especially online.
Yeah.
I don't want to mention names again. So a few people, they start thinking a lot, and they start looking into religions. Why? Because it's the fitrah, right? People believe in God, right?
Yeah.
They wanna ask these questions. They wanna, what happens after death? It scares them. I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
Because in their head, there's a little voice telling them, look, something will happen.
Yeah.
Just because you can't go there doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's not there,
Yeah.
right? Just because we can't go through the door doesn't mean there's nothing there. Just
Yeah.
because we've never been there,
Yeah.
right? And they have this thing, and what they do at the end? They're like, their solution is they just forget about the question.
Yeah.
So you suspend the questions, right? You just avoid it. You just pretend like it's not there.
Mm.
It's like you're in university. You pretend like you haven't got exams, yeah, and your worry goes away. You're getting worried. Oh my god, I haven't started my revision in 1 month's time. You know what? Let me forget about it. You don't think about them at all. That's it. And then what happens on exam day? Then you realize. Then you realize that you've lost out. And this is, I think, the majority of the problem.
And you know what it
that
is?
happens
I think
all the
this
time.
is exactly what the definition of kufr is, right? To cover the truth. To just, as you said, suspend the question. You know it's there, but you're just covering. But I want to come back to what you were saying, Akhi, right? About are they really free, right? I think you were going to touch upon something.
No, yeah, it's very strange when you think about it,
Yeah.
because to like you said, to claim that you're free because you're not following a god, or you're
Yeah.
not in submission to a creator, right? It's almost so you can do what you want, what your whims and desires suggest to you, right?
Yeah.
But then you're already submitting to your whims and desires, right? You're in submission to time. You're gonna pass through life and you're gonna get to death, like it or not, right? You're in submission to the fact that you're male or female.
Laws of
you know?
physics.
Yeah, laws of physics. The fact that you're breathing, you're submitting to breathing in some aspects, because you
Yeah.
can't live without breathing. So you're submitting to these things already, right? So why not then stop? Submit yourself to the creator who creates all of these things, has put these things in place. And can these things come out of nothing and by chance and at random? I don't think so. I mean, no rational, logical person will suggest that all of this everything we see around us, the world, the trees, the grass, everything in creation can come out of nothing.
There's some really good examples, right? And the atheists hate this. And you know what they're like, the watch in the desert and the explosion. And you know what they say? You know what the argument, the defeater is?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an old argument.
Yeah, but
The example's quite old. Does that mean anything? It's
time
ridiculous.
and time again,
You tell them that there's an explosion in a book factory, right? Would they give you a book? They're like, no, that's a different example. Because that's a human creation.
Yeah, it's important to address the arguments and not attack where they came from or who's delivering them. And this is very important that people understand this. Yeah, they do that. And hardly ever, like whenever brother Hamza Zortzis, I can't say
Georges.
Georges makes an argument,
How do you
right?
pronounce it?
Georges.
Sources.
I'm not going to try and pronounce it.
Yeah,
I was
anyway.
calling Zulz this
Okay. Whenever Hamza makes an argument, most of the time what you see when someone tries refuting him is, oh, this is from William Lane Craig, or this is from this guy, and so on and so on. So deal with the argument.
Yeah.
You know, why are you beating around the bush for? It's about, you know, deal with the argument at hand, what's in front of you. See, it's just sad, you know. But I think can we just move on to another important aspect, which is the Muslims, you know.
Okay.
Our brothers and sisters that are out there, you know.
This is the exciting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is the
And this
important,
is you know,
crucial.
for those that have been patient enough to actually listen through it,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah, forgive us sometimes we can
waffle
get
on
a bit involved, but you know, it's because they're passionate about the topic. This is what I want to come to, right? Okay, so the Muslims need to appreciate that there is a duty upon them to go and communicate the message as it is. Especially in the face of people who are standing at your doorstep and trying to basically push falsehood down your throat. And they're misleading the masses, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold you accountable with regards to if you fulfilled your obligation or not. One of the biggest problems that the Muslims have is that they feel an inferiority complex with regards to these individuals. But within the last year and a half, I think the tables have really turned, more so over the last 2 months or so. We've seen that atheism, all of these, and new atheism most, but atheism in general, right? Because, you know, the premises are the same. Atheism in general is not all that it's cracked up to be. In essence, when you explore their arguments, they can't even justify their own standpoint. For example, in the previous video that I did with Brother Imran, he explained the argument from reason, right? How atheisms, I mean, you know, could you just refresh our memory with regards to that?
No,
Do you want to quickly
no,
go?
good.
It's simply this, right? You to claim naturalism is true is self-contradictory, basically. You can't claim anything because if all
and naturalism is the view that
it's
only the natural
physical world.
exists.
There's nothing
There's
beyond
there's
the
no
physical.
God, there's no nothing.
It's all physical,
Okay.
right? Everything that comes into existence is a cause of the physical.
Physical.
Yeah.
Because we can't see it, therefore we don't believe it.
Yeah, I mean that's what the naturalistic position is. That
Yeah.
it's all natural, it's all physical. If this is the case, then we as human beings are also a result of lengthy sort of random physical processes because there's no consciousness to these processes, right?
Professor Krauss said, when I was with him, he said
Yeah.
it's a cosmic accident.
Okay, that sums it up. You know, that's actually quite eloquently done by Professor Krauss at that point. But the point is, you know, we're accident, right? A lengthy, you know, an accidental byproduct of a lengthy evolutionary process. It's evolution and natural selection, basically, right? These are unconscious blind processes, right? Now, there's no way these blind unconscious processes can dictate, right? There's no way these unconscious processes can dictate our ability to reason or reason to the truth, right? Distinguish between truth and falsehood. Why? Because, you know, if natural selection and evolution are geared towards making sure that we survive only, it's all about survival, yeah? Then we know that true beliefs as well as false beliefs can both, you know, lead to survival. There's no necessity to develop the ability to reason to the truth.
So what you're saying is basically, according to the atheists, there's no way for them to rationally show that they have any reason.
No, I mean
any rational.
No, because how
beliefs
can they
or
rationally believe that their idea of atheism is true
you can't.
if their brain is just a random event? It's like a monkey going like this on a computer
Nothing's true.
for a
Nothing's
billion
true.
years.
Yeah.
Then he makes a software, right? And the software does things for you. Are you going to trust what the software does? Because random, your brain is random as well.
You see, and that's what I just want to highlight here, right? Atheists, why we think they're so rational, so smart, so intelligent, they've got all these fancy words, right? All these big PhDs, but they can't even rationalize how they got that PhD in the first place, right? Another example is, you know, more so specifically to these naturalistic atheists who take the scientism approach, right? Say science is the way, the light, and the truth, and it will answer everything. Scientism means the absolute truth. I mean, that's self-contradictory. The only means, right?
Yeah.
Because that's self-contradictory, because that statement itself is a metaphysical statement, and it cannot be empirically or scientifically proven in any way, shape, or form.
You'll have to deny many truths to claim scientism is true.
Exactly,
for example,
right?
Moral truths, mathematical truths, even the sort of assumptions of the axioms of science as well. You have to deny them.
Exactly, and the point of us highlighting this is so the Muslims can now obviously take a sigh of breath, alhamdulillah, and appreciate And not that we've ever had any doubts, but sometimes, let's be honest, there is a bit of an inferiority complex because, when someone stands and talks to you in such an intimidating way, you can't help as human beings but to feel, a bit belittled. But the reality is that I want to share with our brothers and sisters is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah An-Nisa, don't fear Shaytaan. For what? The plan of Shaytaan is da'if, weak. The plan of Shaytaan is weak. And atheism seems to be the new plan of Shaytaan.
The cover's lifting now.
And wow, atheism is weak. It's weak. There are no arguments. There's no rational arguments. There's no one rational
But the thing is, look, fine, we don't have anything against normal atheists. I'm not talking about new atheists, right?
Course, yeah.
We discuss with them, we will talk to them, because look, there's other religions, right?
Yeah.
They'll run away. They won't want to talk to you about it. They won't want to talk to you about their religion. They don't want to discuss it. It's private. It's all this.
Yeah.
Islam, Muslims, right? They're fearless. Okay, they will discuss with you. They will debate with you. They will talk because Allah tells this religion. It challenges other people to challenge it.
Yeah.
Challenges the religion, right?
Yeah.
And we go. People debate. We talk. We discuss. People, they can message you. They can contact you. We're not hiding.
Yeah.
We don't want to answer. We don't want to hide and not answer questions.
Yeah.
We do that. We give people explanation. We tell them about the religion.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Allah says in the Quran, if you think that this book, this Quran, is not from God, then produce something like it.
Yeah.
It brings me to another really funny thing. I saw a guy on YouTube, right? He's trying to mock this, and he's like, oh, in chapter this it says bring 10 verses. In chapter this it says bring one chapter. Well, I think they need to make their mind up. It's what Allah is doing here is when you tell a person, right, oh, write 10 lines for me.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what, forget it, just do 5.
Yeah.
You know what, okay, do 1. And it shows you how they haven't studied it, they don't understand it, and they go on and make a fool of themselves. And that's why I didn't even watch the rest of the video.
Yeah.
Because that's how ridiculous these people are. And Muslims really need to look in and see how weak it really is, like you said. And just stand up, study and start, and maybe you can make the announcement and tell them about.
So here's the thing, right? We obviously it's an obligation for them to get involved, and now it doesn't seem as much of a difficult task. But as we know, as we're human beings, if you leave us to our own devices, we'll probably never get round to it.
Yeah.
So many brothers and sisters that would want to get involved, inshallah, we're going to facilitate for them to actually engage in this da'wah by doing webinars discussing these topics in depth and
but it'll be selected. It won't be offered to everyone.
Exactly.
Those who want to come, we'll have them, inshallah.
Exactly. They need to impose themselves upon us. So they can obviously see the email address below right now, inshallah. And they should obviously email us to this email address, and they'll be sent an application form. If they fill it out and if they get selected, then inshallah they'll be put into an elite group by which they would obviously have to engage in some online da'wah with us, and in return what they will receive is da'wah training, right? And not just your average street da'wah training, but we're going to be taking it up a notch, inshallah. What I want you to do, Akhi, to conclude for us, inshallah, is explain this beautiful little narrative to us.
Okay. Alright, inshallah. Alright, so we have this big field, right? And it's huge, and it's in the middle of a big forest, right? And there's these new atheists, and you have Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss and Sam Harris and all of their blind followers with them having a great time, right? And all of a sudden, one of them looks up and says, "What's that coming?" And they see an arrow. And the arrow's on fire as well. And it's coming straight at Lawrence Krauss. And when you look who shot the arrow, it's actually Hamza Georges. And he shoots this arrow straight in the middle of the party, and it's like a disaster. Everyone's running around, they're like, what is this? They're crazy. They become even more angry. They were angry before, right? But now that the party's destroyed, right? And they think it's only Hamza. But little do they realize, when they look, they can't obviously see behind the hill. When they look behind the hill, there's all of these Muslims ready to come and help and attack them as well. Attack their ideas. Just a note to, MI6, this is not real. Okay, this is just an intellectual idea. And there's all these Muslims coming forward and starting to defend Islam. And this started when this arrow was shot. And if you want to be part of this group, you want to be in this group of Muslims who defends Islam, who defends the religion of Allah, and tells other people, you need to sign up and email us on this address. We're going to take you, we're going to teach you, we're going to give you sources, resources, we're going to direct you to the right place so you can come out and defend the faith against these crazy people who don't even study the religion, who don't even read the Quran, some of who are racist and they go around spreading this worldview which is ridiculous, where you can justify things like rape through sharks, and you can justify incest through horses. And if you want to stop that and you want to make this world a better place, sign up and email the address below. Jazakallah khair.